Ave Imperator, Force Commanders, and welcome to the show. Today we're here to tell you all about Execution Force, which is the second DLC for Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate Daemonhunters. I'm one of your hosts, Bruce from Frontier, and today I'm joined by Paul. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello.
Really looking forward to getting into today's content. There's so much to talk about, but if you are joining us for the first time, Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate Daemonhunters is a game in which you take control of the strike team Xiphos, a unit of Grey Knights dedicated to wiping out the forces of Nurgle, and in particular a plague known as the Bloom. Execution Force, as I just mentioned, is the second major DLC, and it's available now to wishlist, and it's going to be coming out tomorrow if you want to purchase it. We're going to be joined in a moment by a special guest from Complex Games, who's going to talk through all of the content that you can expect in the DLC, as well as a free update that is coming out at the same time. Paul, you're going to be playing the game and checking out some of the new missions and other content as we talk through it. How are you feeling?
Great.
Good. Very pleased to hear that. So, without wasting any more time, let's introduce our special guest.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Going well.
Yeah, we're doing great. Super excited, like we said. Loads to go through today. Shall we give a overview of what this DLC is about, Noah? Could you tell us... Actually, sorry, before that, I'm being so rude. We haven't actually had you on the show before, have we, Noah? So let's slow down for a moment. And if you could tell us about yourself and what your role at Complex Game is and what your experience with Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate Daemonhunters is, that would be great.
Sure, yeah. So I'm the co-founder of Complex Games, and I've been the studio head for the past 22 years. On Chaos Gate, I really served the role officially as game director, but was also wearing a whole bunch of other hats throughout that very long process and since.
Amazing. So what made you decide to create this game in particular?
Chaos Gate overall?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like probably many people watching, I was a huge fan of Warhammer 40,000 from a pretty young age. I played and painted the miniatures for many years, and then after we started a studio, it was always kind of a dream for us to work on that brand and with that IP, because we were always really excited about it, and there's a lot of different things that we felt you could do with it. And so we actually released a mobile game many years ago called Drop Assault, and that ended up doing pretty well. And that was sort of the gateway for us to start working on the ideas that became Chaos Gate, which is really a blend of the types of games that I really enjoy, strategic, tactical RPGs, and the universe of Warhammer 40,000.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations on the game. It's a fantastic game, and we're really excited to talk about this expansion for it. So could you give us a little insight into what your plans and goals were for Execution Force, especially as your second DLC?
Yeah, definitely. So when we started looking at what would ultimately become Execution Force, we really wanted to try and focus on finding ways to introduce new playstyles into the player's combat toolkit. And in the end, as we sort of explored which directions we could go, that meant trying to reach out a bit further away from the core Grey Knights cadre itself into finding other allies of the Imperium. And ultimately, in talking with Games Workshop and thinking of the types of abilities and sort of weapons and experience we wanted to add, that led us to the Officio Assassinorum and ultimately the Four Assassins.
Amazing, and we're really looking forward to talking about the Assassins. So for anyone who hasn't or couldn't tell by now, these are the 4 new units that are going to be introduced to the game, the Assassins. And on top of that, we've also got 2 new types of mission. Could you tell us what those are? We'll dive into them later, but just to give a quick overview.
Sure, yeah. So there's the Tentarus Hive missions, which introduce this vile new bloom spawn called the Hive. That thing will appear during your bloom mission generation and fester on a planet, and you'll have to basically destroy it in order to clear it out and prevent it from advancing the Morbus. And then there are also the Death Guard ship boarding actions. So you have a boarding mission where you're literally teleporting your squad on board a Death Guard ship.
Amazing. Paul, are you feeling confident about achieving all of that? That's a big double thumbs up.
I believe in you, Paul.
All right, we'll find out. So, and on top of that, there are some other little bits and pieces in the update as well. Sorry, in the DLC to help players achieve success in those missions as well. Some new weapons and armor and other bits as well. Is that right?
Yeah, there's an assortment of new war gear, and which will be nice to tap into, as well as some new weapons and armor in circulation from the types of rewards you can receive.
Perfect. And we'll go into all of that in detail. So let's bring it back to the assassins themselves. So these brand new units that are joining up with Strike Team Xiphos. Could you give us a little bit of background and context as to why they've decided to throw their lot in and help the players out and the Grey Knights?
Yeah, so I don't think I'm giving away any secrets when I say that Inquisitor Vakir doesn't have total faith in the Grey Knight's commitment to getting the job done with the Bloom.
I'm shocked and surprised.
Yeah. Well, she's trying to find any other way she can use to help support her efforts to wipe out this plague. And so the support from the Officio Assassinorum comes through her calling in some favors through the Inquisition.
Right, and she's leveraging this connection she has then with the Officio Assassinorum. And players who've been keeping an eye on our social channels for a while may have seen those teasers we did a while back, which explained some of the or showed some of the communications back and forth between Vakir and the Officio Assassinorum, hinting at this. So, all right, that's fantastic. In terms of the units themselves, in what ways do they differ from the Grey Knights that players are used to using? How do they play differently? What kind of mechanics can players expect to experience which are different than what they might be used to?
Well, I guess a big difference is that the assassins aren't particularly psychic focused, with the exception of one, which is very anti-psychic. So their abilities actually operate on cooldowns as opposed to using the willpower resource primarily. Again, one exception to that. So you're going to have to manage your resources when playing them slightly differently than you would the Grey Knights. The assassins are also not as resilient as the Grey Knights are, not as durable. So throwing them directly into the fray will generally involve a lot more risk reward. It's possible to take 4 assassins into your squad, but I really wouldn't recommend it, as I think they're best suited to kind of specifically augment the strength of different types of squads, depending on what kind of mission you're trying to tackle.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Some points there I want to explore a little bit further. So yeah, the cooldown system for abilities is really interesting, and Paul, you'll have to bear this in mind, I suppose, then. So it sounds like the timing of your abilities is going to be even more important with assassins, where yeah, if you want to be chaining attacks, let's say, in a certain way or approaching at certain times, you've got to make sure you've got your cooldowns lined up, whereas with the Grey Knights, you can obviously activate abilities based on having access to willpower and those resources. Have you found that to be the case when you've played with them so far?
On my side, yeah, the exception is the Culexus, and I guess we'll get into that because it's quite a bit more unique. But yeah, generally you have to be careful with when you use your abilities, and there's ways to kind of accelerate your cooldowns as well, so you're not necessarily like locked into waiting too many turns.
Sure, that's great. And then the other point was you touched on that you can have a mixed squad of both assassins and Grey Knights. And you also said that you could also, if you wanted to, have all 4 assassin units in a single squad. But you didn't necessarily recommend that because you mentioned that their abilities will complement the Grey Knights classes quite naturally. Are there any limitations in terms of how many assassins you can bring to a squad? Are you able to bring multiple or one of each, or how does it work?
You can bring 1 assassin of each type technically to a squad. So you could technically bring 1 of each type, 1 Vindicar, Culexus, Kalidas, and Eversor, sorry, to the mix. But a lot of them sort of ping off of the Grey Knight's abilities. well. So because of their lack of resilience, it might be a much greater challenge to get through an entire mission just with the assassins on their own.
Sure. All right then. So in terms of other details about the assassins, at what point and how will players gain access to them during their campaign? Say they've got access to the DLC now. When will they be able to start using them?
So you'll get access to the assassins very early if you've just started a new campaign, and you'll get to essentially just choose one free assassin from the 4 almost immediately through an event in the game, and then you can unlock the others through the use of requisition resources. And in terms of existing saves, quite like we've done with other DLCs, you'll be prompted when you load an existing campaign save, and you'll be able to turn on the DLC, and that should give you access to the assassins fairly close to immediately.
Okay, perfect. That's fantastic. So shall we drill down into what the individual assassins are, what their abilities do, etc.? We can start with the Vindicar assassin then. So what is this first assassin all about, Noah?
Yeah, so the Vindicar is really a long-range sniper unit. They really work best keeping a distance. They can use their special talents to deal pretty excessive crits and get into precision targeting with the Exodus rifle, so very long range, which is quite a rare ability. They have a special ability that allows them to instant kill an organic target, and then they have a limited stealth, which can help them avoid taking damage under certain conditions.
Sure, so it sounds like the classic sniper type class.
Totally.
The insta-kill ability sounds incredible. Are there any restrictions to that, or how does it work?
It specifically targets organic units, so we have kind of 3 types of units that exist in the game. Some are mechanical, some are organic, and the others are demonic. So it can definitely be very useful against a lot of the standard Death Guard units, but some of the sort of bigger demons, it won't do anything.
Sure thing.
And presumably means it wouldn't be as useful for a boss fight, because most of the bosses are demonic and mechanical.
Right.
Exactly.
That makes sense. I also understand that the Vindicar attacks, a lot of them introduce bleed to the enemy, and that bleed has been slightly reworked in the update that's coming alongside the DLC. Is that true?
Yeah, I think we already may have gotten the some preliminary bleed changes in the last round, but basically bleed now stacks. So you have bleed effects, they'll stack up, and the duration of the bleed equals the amount of the bleed value. So, if you have a bleed 5, then the unit's going to be taking 5 damage on the first turn, then 4 damage on the next turn, and so on. So for units that have really high HP, bleed can be a very effective way of trying to deal with that, large hit point sink that will show up in the battlefield, particularly in this DLC.
Oh, that's great. So if you wanted to have a squad that is committed to introducing as many bleed effects on the enemy as possible, the Vindicar feels like a really good choice for that, so you can start stacking that up and, like say...
Quite useful with the Apothecary and the abilities they have to introduce bleed areas.
Definitely.
Amazing. All right, so that sounds like we've just about covered the Vindicar assassin. So yeah, just to rattle off the abilities then. So I think they're called precision targeting. So this was critically wounding an enemy from the distance that you mentioned. Deadshot, which kills the organic targets instantly. And then the stealth ability as well, thanks to its stealth suit that it's wearing. Amazing, really looking forward to using this. Paul, are you already considering using this in the missions that you've got coming up?
Yeah, I think they're a very sort of strong contender.
A strong contender. All right, should we move on to contestant number 2?
Contestant number 2, yes.
For full squad. What can you tell us, Noah, about the Eversor assassin?
So the Eversor assassin is fueled by a cocktail of combat drugs and goes into a sort of psychotic rage on the battlefield. So what we've cooked up with this character is a kind of unique sacrifice mechanic where your abilities are in some ways capped by depleting the unit's HP as it essentially powers up. and in some cases, it can recover that HP through a powerful chain of attacks.
Nice. So almost sort of a assassin berserker type unit.
Totally.
They're the thing you unleash when you've been spotted in a stealth mission and therefore have to kill all the witnesses.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's me in stealth games, by the way. I get spotted and I'm like, okay, well, forget this. Just berserk everyone. Great, and I love the flavour of this. So we're looking at the game now, and there he is in the tank.
Sealed away to prevent any risk.
Too dangerous to be let loose on the Baleful Edict. So you mentioned the sacrifice mechanic where the Eversaur is going to be expending HP instead of relying on willpower or cooldowns to use its abilities. It sounds like it's going to run out of HP pretty quickly then if it's attacking lots of enemies. How does the Eversaur get around that issue?
So, essentially gets around it by killing other units. As it destroys other units, it recovers its HP. And the amount of HP it recovers depends on the maximum HP of the units it's destroyed. So, larger units, if you get the bigger kill, then you can, just recover all of your HP in a very short period of time.
Right.
It's a little bit like the willpower mechanic if you melee kill an enemy to get the willpower back.
Yeah, similar sort of thing where you're seeing a return on getting kills. All right then, could you talk us through the abilities that the Eversaur Assassin has?
Sure, yeah. So, the most straightforward one is you can just sacrifice health for action points. So you can ramp up the Eversaur's actions, and that's, obviously big risk because a lot of the Eversaur's abilities are kind of get in close and get messy with other units in melee. So jumping in and sacking a bunch of HP in order to get actions and do a lot of damage is great, but obviously it can make the Eversaur a little more vulnerable.
Sure. Is this a unit where, so you mentioned that it kills an enemy unit and will gain HP back based on the maximum health of that unit. So would you say have something like maybe a Vindicar or some other long-ranged unit weakening the enemies for the Eversaur to run in and then start chain killing and fueling itself in a sort of cycle? Is that the way you would play this?
Exactly, yeah, that's a great way to combo it in. The Eversaur also has a bunch of ways of dealing bleed and then can ramp up the amount of damage it does fairly aggressively by the amount of bleed on a specific unit. So you can do these very high damage spike attacks through use of its friends on stins and some of its other abilities.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to move us along because we've got two more assassin units still to cover. So can we talk about the Kulexus and...
The scary one.
Yeah, the scary one. What can you tell us about the Kulexus assassin unit?
Yeah, the Kulexus it's a null psyker. So it specializes in anti-psychic combat and more or less has complete immunity to psychic abilities. So this class is pretty useful against demonic units, but it's probably our most unique unit overall to date. It has the ability to exercise some control over closing warp rifts, wiping out enemy boons and mutations, and can even limit the amount of the warp surge meter from rising and triggering another warp surge.
Interesting. So it's almost sort of a cleansing unit for shutting down all this psychic stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and it absorbs willpower through both killing units and from your other knights using their psychic abilities. And that sort of absorption serves as a kind of shield, so it can take some risks by raising up its willpower value very high through the actions of other units.
Interesting. Thank you for the extra context. I'm actually just looking at the unit right now, and the helmet is so striking. That's that's the key component really of the unit, isn't it, in terms of how it behaves, what it uses to attack, and everything else, right?
Yeah, that's the Animus Speculum, and you can charge that up with the willpower that you accumulate from other units, and do some massive damage.
Amazing.
And it's a war gear, so you can get different versions as well.
Totally.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Can we take a quick look at the abilities that this unit has?
Yeah.
And can you tell us what kinds of abilities you might be using if you deploy this assassin?
Yeah, so I mean, Nullify is effectively a field that wipes out boons for the enemy and can be used to purge mutations. So it can be particularly effective, especially later in the game where mutations on your enemies are accumulating, and they can provide like drastically improved offense to the opponent. So you can just wipe those out. Life Draining Touch can just silence and prevent certain units, particularly demons, from using their psychic abilities. Close Rift is a really useful one. So you know how as the game advances and you have warp surges that call in new and reinforcements, they create these warp rifts that are usually about a turn before they trigger and bring in a new enemy squad. The Culexes can actually close specific warp rifts. It costs them a lot of resources, but you can effectively remove an entire incoming patrol from the combat, which is pretty useful.
That strikes me as a very useful one to use.
Yeah, definitely. And then for our fourth unit, sorry to move this along so quickly, I'm really keen for us to get into a mission and give Paul a chance to try out these units. We have the Calidus assassins. So what's the deal here, Noah?
So the Calidus is an infiltration unit, and that means that, effectively through their polymorphine ability, they can disguise themselves as an enemy unit, allowing them to move in the fog and not disturb or trigger any patrolling squads. And not only can they sort of move around freely in that way, they can also interact with enemy patrols, making them more vulnerable or even assassinating specific units in enemy patrols that are not active.
That's really interesting. That's such a unique ability and a way to play. It introduces a way to play the game we haven't seen before.
And it's very different from the Interceptor as well in how it plays.
Yeah, absolutely. So an infiltration expert. The fact it can, go right up to enemies without triggering combat is going to be so crucial for planning and feeling out different maps, and hopefully that will come into play, maybe even during your missions, Paul, when we have to scout out various areas. Can you run us through the abilities very quickly? So you mentioned the polymorphine already.
Yeah, polymorphine is the really appealing one. Poison blades is just a way of getting through armor, effectively sort of infiltrating it through key enemy armor. Reign of Confusion can disable an enemy patrol's ranged abilities, so you can infiltrate an enemy patrol, prevent them from using their ranged weapons, and then reveal them so they start to scatter, and then effectively they're a lot more a lot more restricted than they would otherwise be in the first round of combat. Gauge vulnerabilities can make the enemy patrol vulnerable. There's a lot of different ways of messing with enemy patrol before you even started combat with them.
Perfect. All right, so that's going to wrap things up. Paul, have you started to decide what kinds of combos and units you want to bring along?
It's going to be interesting to play around with. I think the Calidus is a definite contender, as is the Vindicator. I kind of want to use the Eversaw for just the sheer brutality, but I think if I try and be a bit more sort of professional in the gameplay, then the Calidus and the Vindicator, I think, are the top of the list.
Okay, sounds good. Very quickly before we move on from the new units then, so just as a reminder, you can bring any number of assassins, but no more than one of a given kind on any mission. And we're not just talking missions in the new DLC, right? These are any missions in the whole game once you've unlocked them. Is that right, Noah?
Yeah, they work basically like your knights. You can interchange them on your squad of 4 and bring any ones you want.
Perfect. And then the last thing we didn't touch on just yet is the rank system that players will have noticed as we were going through the abilities there. So can you tell us about that system and gaining more abilities as the assassins become more experienced?
Sure, yeah. The assassins are very specialized, so you don't have the same sort of total expansive skill tree that the Grey Knights have, but they will gain levels and rank up their abilities and gain new abilities as you go up from rank 1 through to rank 9.
Perfect. All right then. So, Paul, if you're ready, shall we navigate to the first of the 2 new mission types that we're going to dive into? We mentioned these earlier, and the first is the Tentarus Hive mission. So as we start that, if you jump in now, Paul, and just get going, and we'll talk you through it as we go. Noah, what is the Tentarus Hive mission type all about?
So the Tentarus Hive is a brutal new bloom spawn creation that is shielded by these what we call hive germs that are scattered throughout the map. So while you begin the mission, you won't be able to target the hive directly. You're going to have to basically spread out and attack its germs. The other challenge with the mission is that the hive has an ability to blast an area with malaise and cause your knights a lot of damage over time. So you've got to be very careful not to group up your knights so tightly, or if they spend too much time going through taking out the germs, they may be far too weak by the time they clear those in order to defeat the hive.
Right, so there is a sense of time pressure in that you don't want to be spending too much time around here, because it sounds like the environment's going to wear down on you a bit. Paul,
Definitely.
how are you feeling about your squad? You ready to go?
All right, so I've chosen a Calidus assassin. We've got an apothecary, an interceptor, and a Vindicare assassin. I was toying with the Calexus. I can never pronounce its name, the scary one, but I think I'll try these out.
Okay. How do you rate Paul's setup, Noah?
Looks pretty good. You're going to need some maneuverability, which the interceptor can provide. You're definitely going to need the apothecary services. So let's see how it goes.
All right,
Okay.
Let's hop into it. Good luck, Paul.
Here we go.
Good luck, Paul.
All right. How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Anyway,
All right. So you mentioned, Noah, that the hive itself will fire a long-range blast that's going to be affecting Paul's squad here. Do you recommend splitting up the units for that reason, and also to help with taking out the hive germs?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, that's it's pretty common. It's a sort of central strategy in a lot of Chaos Gate missions, just to group your knights and inflict as much damage in a concentrated period of time as possible. To succeed at the Tentarus Hive, you are going to have to split up. I mean, it's possible to keep all of your units together, but they're going to weather a lot of damage from the Tentarus Hive's blast. So I would definitely recommend, if you don't have a squad tweaked very specifically to deal with that you try and split them up and do your best by wiping out the germs as quickly as you can.
Sure thing. So we can see in the UI there, we've got the hive germs, 5 of them to locate Paul, and then the Tentarus Hive itself, which, like you said, no, is going to be invulnerable for the time being until all 5 of those germs are taken out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right.
okay. So any indicator on the map where they are. There we go. Yeah. That's a squad, but let's go stab them in the face anyway.
Are you feeling brave enough to split your squad into 2 parts, maybe?
I mean, we'll see how it goes.
What are you thinking? 1 assassin, 1 knight?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I will send them off in 2 teams. Can I go that way? No. Let's go this way. Okay.
And don't forget that the Calidus can patrol ahead of you and not risk triggering an enemy patrol.
That is true.
She's in polymorphines.
How long does the polymorph last for?
Until you turn it off.
Oh, goody. That's...
So it feels like the Calidus is a perfect unit for scouting maps.
Definitely.
All right.
Scouting maps, scouting patrols. Yeah, it'll give you a lot more information on where is the best time to sort of trigger combat.
Sure.
And that. I've been
That's the
shot.
hive.
Right. So the hive knows where we are and it's going to be doing its best to eject us right from turn 1.
Yeah, and you'll have to be careful because you might have been afflicted with a negative effect there, which could wear you down pretty well over time. Oh yeah, you've got plague.
Right, I'm really seeing the value in splitting your knights. Even if you have, say, 2 teams that you're splitting your squad into, would you want to keep those units even within each team a reasonable distance apart, just to make sure you're mitigating that damage and only taking it on one unit?
Yeah, I mean, you need to keep them quite a ways apart because the blast from the Hive is pretty wide.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's not an easy thing to judge, but here we go.
In my sights.
Nice.
I like the range
Almost
on the Vindicator Assassin.
Yeah, that was you shot it from very far away. That's going to be useful, especially given there are so many to find all over the map. It's going to be being able to take them out at distance is going to cut down on the time it takes.
Now my Calidus can't be seen, is that correct?
That's right. Your Calidus should be
I
able to
can
walk right in there.
Bravely walk them over there.
And you'll see that the fog doesn't get revealed.
Yeah.
And as you get a bit closer, you'll be able to see outlines of enemy units.
Move you here.
Uh-oh.
Lapdogs of the false emperor.
Ah, so we have triggered combat with our other unit.
The uh-oh is the standard response to watching me play.
All right, what do we have here, Paul?
Right now, I think it's going to be best to stick the Aegis Shield on for him because he can't get close enough to hurt them. So just do that for now, give him a bit of defense.
All right, we're taking some plague damage as well. Is the Hive going to take another shot?
Oh, he spotted my guy.
Is that because we've triggered combat with our
Because
other unit?
you triggered combat with the other units, so...
Curses!
Right.
I feel I've already started this off very well.
You know, that actually might not be the case. It may just be that the Plague Belcher set up the hazard for your knight. You might not be aware of your Calidus yet. You can just test
Alright.
that.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Oh, Bloom Rising.
The bloom is rising very quickly as well. I'm noticing every turn.
Yeah, this
See
is a
that
high
being-
corruption map, so you're
Yeah.
gonna have to definitely have to pick up the pace as best as you
Let's
can.
teleport to here.
That's it. Getting
We're
out of that
going to-
Overwatch is nice.
Slice and dice this one. Get rid of those pesky arms if we can. Let's get rid of his ranged weapon. He fell right into the map.
I was noticing on that unit, that enemy unit there, it's got a 15% chance to mutate on hit as well. That's one of the new status effects, isn't it? Is it the Tainted Suns?
That's right, yeah. So with this new DLC, we've introduced a form of a spawn group called the Tainted Suns. So this is Mortarian's chosen elite, and we've introduced a number of new units as part of free DLC that will join with your larger cadre of Death Guard units on the Tainted Suns. So in terms of this group, one unique advantage that they all get is a chance to mutate every time they're hit, which can effectively ramp up their power very, very quickly if they last in combat for any length of time.
Sure. So I suppose the idea then is, that's nice, look at that.
There you go.
That's wicked.
I like this unit.
Look at that.
And then we'll kill this remaining
Oh,
one.
the double. So that's what you want to be doing, especially if they've got a chance to mutate on each hit. You want to be doing big damage,
Yeah.
trying to take them out in as few hits as possible.
We need to find the other thing which is there. That's not a seed, is it?
That's your germ right
Is
there.
that the germ?
Oh,
Yeah.
it is. Oh, okay. Let's
Yeah.
go stab it in the face.
Nice.
So I'll activate a death strike button here.
So yeah, the high rate of mutation seems like it could potentially ramp out of control, like you say, Noah, especially with the new type of, well, there are 2 new types, aren't they, of Warp Surge that are being introduced with the update.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's the big one is Generous Fusions, I think, which is giving more HP to all allied units. So there's definitely a risk because you have more mutations, you have greater amounts of HP from generous effusions, and then some of these newer Tentarus Hive units are very hit point heavy. So in that way, the sort of strength of the enemies that you're facing can ramp up very, very quickly. So you have to think about the kind of counters that you're going to use to deal with that. We talked a little bit about using bleed in one case, so having units that can inflict a lot of bleed can tear those HP down over a couple of turns. And then also trying to make use of more purge type abilities to wipe out mutations. And there's a couple of new sources of purge in the game as well.
Yeah, I can see that becoming especially important. Like you say, the generous effusions giving more HP obviously means more chances to mutate if they're tanking hits. And then the other one is roiling mutations, if I've got that right, which is going to instantly mutate all enemies.
Yeah, it's a dangerous one.
Yeah, so fingers crossed we don't see too much of that today, Paul. But you're doing well, So you've taken out 2 hives already?
Well, one and a
one
bit.
and a bit.
One should be taken out in the next turn.
Yeah.
Oh, you're practically done.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Let's get our apothecary here to get rid of the armor, because of course we got hit by a warp surge. And then it can kill it off.
Nice, taking care of business.
Nice.
Good job, Paul.
And their polymorph, has that reset? It has. So let's use that again.
Can I just take a moment to say, Noah, how beautiful this level looks, and all of the work you guys have put in to make the game look incredible has really paid off. The mix of the purples and the greens, the colours are so vivid, and the units themselves and the environment, all of it looks fantastic.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. Like, it's really fun to work with these kinds of environments where we can bring all of this crazy, like exotically colored Nurgle mutations and bloom spawn into the mix, and that gives us all these radical purple and green tones, which it's just adds a little bit of flavor to the grimdark of the 40k universe.
Absolutely. On that note, we're actually going to finish up with this mission because I want to save enough time for us to try out the Death Guard boarding mission as well. So we'll see you in a moment, Noah, to reset and try on the other type of mission as well. Good job, Paul. I think you did really well to take out a couple of germs. Everyone at home, we'll see if you can carry on in Paul's stead, take out the germs, and also reach the hive itself in this brand new mission type. If you're just joining us, welcome to the show. I'm Bruce, and I'm joined today by Paul and Noah to take a look at Execution Force, the second DLC for Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate Daemonhunters, which introduces 4 new types of unit, the Assassins, as well as 2 new mission types, the second of which we're just about to jump into. So, hello again, Paul.
Hello.
How are you feeling for the Death Guard boarding mission?
I'm looking forward to this one. It's a nice. So you have the boarding missions have already been in the games as they're sort of choice based, whereas now you actually have the option to go. I'm going to go and brutally murder everybody on that ship myself. So I've been quite looking forward to that because a number of times I've chosen the wrong option, and this is my chance for revenge.
Excellent. All right, so we'll let you crack on, and while you take your first turn and start thinking about your units, I noticed we've actually got the other 2 assassins in your squad this time, so who are we bringing along?
So we currently have the Kulexus Assassin, which is as Warhammer 40k fans will know, they are essentially null psychers. So you've got people with psychic sort of powers, and you've got the warp, which is sort of psychic based, and these are essentially voids of psychic energy. So the rest of the galaxy thinks they are phenomenally scary because essentially being a psychic void means you kind of have no soul. So that they're things that just look wrong. But the Imperium went, hey, let's immediately turn them into a deadly weapon. So they're quite fun to have around. So we've got those. And then the other one we have is the Eversaw Assassin. They basically pump themselves up with various stims, get thrown into the mix, and just go berserk and wild. So I'm looking forward to playing as both of these.
Excellent, very exciting. Noah, can you tell us what the Death Guard boarding missions are all about, what our objectives are, what the context is?
Sure, yeah. So it's kind of, as Paul said, it's an alternative to the previous option we used to have in Chaos Gate, where the boarding mission was an option you could select, and it would just kind of resolve with the result automatically. Here now, you'll always have an option when you encounter a Death Guard ship of boarding that ship and taking on a boarding mission. And in order to win the mission, you'll have to destroy the power generators on board the ship. There are usually 4 of them in a very limited amount of time. I think Paul's only got 10 turns here. So that's definitely going to be a challenge. You might want to consider whether or not to split your forces here as well. Obviously going to be a little difficult with you being on the enemy's home turf, and your stratagems are also disabled in this case because you're behind their shields effectively.
Right, so some additional challenges to think about there, Paul. Are you going to consider splitting your squad for this one?
Well, we already have them sort of split up already. So we've got the Kulaks here, and one of the knights, I think, is a Justicar. Yeah, it looks like Justicar. So we've got those in 2 separate areas. So we're going to try and take out 2 at the same time and hope for the best. What I think I might do is focus the Kulaks on taking out the generator and the knight on taking out the enemies.
Seems intelligent. Well,
so
good
see
luck.
how that goes. Right, so it's this one's go first. So I'm going to shoot at the thing. Do I want to warp charge it? No, I don't. Fire. Oh, that is a satisfying blast.
Now, one thing to remember is that Qlexus is going to generate more willpower as your other knights use their abilities. So you may want to try and get your other knights to activate as many of their abilities as possible, and then kind of trigger the Qlexus's other abilities that cost willpower.
So that's one of those synergies and interplay between the Grey Knights and the assassin units that you were talking about earlier, and why you might want to consider having a mix rather than going all of one or all of other on any particular mission.
Let's hit this one.
What do you think of Paul's strategy here, having essentially split the squad into 2, and then each of those units, one of them taking care of the enemies and one of them taking care of the generator? Does that seem like a sound tactic to you, Noah?
Generally, I think that's the best way to go. It's hard to take out a squad with a solo unit, and given that you only have 10 turns to get through this, sending your entire squad 1 generator at a time could be a little slow. It's possible, but I think the 2 and 2 approach is probably the most sound here.
All right, good stuff.
You've
got the seal of approval.
That made me happy. Now I think I'm going to do things differently for this one. I'm going to focus the apothecary. First off, I'm going to make them cause some bleed. Just start that off.
All right, getting some of that bleed strategy going.
And then, because it's the apothecary, I'm going to focus him on shooting the power generator.
And like you mentioned, Noah, bleed has had a bit of a rework now, so it's stacking and it's cumulative as well. So where Paul has applied bleed 4 on those enemies, that's effectively 10 damage over 4 turns that those units are now going to take, unless Paul applies any additional bleed. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. And the Eversor has a couple of interesting interactions with bleed directly. Should be able to do some extra damage to a unit that already has bleed afflicted to it.
Nice.
Oh, and yeah, it's the Friends on Stims works quite like the teleport strike, so you'll need to find a destination at the end.
Oh, right, yeah, of course.
Overloaded. Okay.
Might as well overload. Oh, well.
It's a lot of bleed.
Let's do that.
Go on then. Nice. Excellent.
Yes, I will do that, please.
Wow.
Yes, the damage bonus from Eviscerate is massive because he had, what, 12 bleed on?
Right, so we converted bleed into damage there. So that was a really nice combo there, Paul, where you set it up with an apothecary to get some initial bleed on, stacked it on top, and then, yeah, converted that all into damage. Really nicely done. Again, another one of those combinations. So perhaps the apothecary and the Eversor Assassin are sort of a natural combination there.
Definitely. Yeah, that's pretty good combo. And there's some new weapons that are work their way into the game that can also give your knights additional sources of bleed. So you'll be able to use combos with other knights as well.
Excellent. Shall we talk about the... Oh,
Sorry, my bleed build-up just took out an enemy in once as soon as he finished his turn.
Nice. Good stuff. Sorry, I have some reinforcements coming in, but I feel like, Paul, you're more than capable of taking them on at this stage.
Let's take out one power generator. And there's 4 on the map, isn't it, yet?
Great
That's
work.
right.
25% done.
I don't want to charge straight forward.
Oh, it's hard, because if you go up those stairs, there's no cover. Not that I can see.
Let's move him
well.
here for the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, so now we can see the enemy.
All right.
You got to.
Sorry, Noah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you got to remember that the Eversor is sort of fueled by that HP sacrifice mechanic. So you don't want to get caught in a position where the enemies can retaliate after you've just spent a whole bunch of actions to spend
That is
HP.
true.
Otherwise, you could just get knocked out super easily.
So let's move you here, and we are going to scourge them again.
Nice.
Shall we talk about stakes of the Death Guard boarding mission, Noah? So, what are the risks if a player fails, let's say, to destroy all the power generators within the time limit?
If you fail, then I mean, not only do your squad come out damaged, which is obviously a pain. It's going to take them a while to recover, but your ship is more likely to take damage as a result of failing the mission. The advantage, though, is that if you can succeed in the mission, then you're not likely to take any damage from the encounter with the Death Guard ship. So it's a good option if, for example, you haven't invested in any cannons or any other sort of extra sort of defenses for the Baleful Edict. Then just taking it directly to combat as on the boarding mission can be a good option.
Right. So you could actually use this to supplement your meta strategy with the Baleful Edict itself, which is really nice. I like that.
Exactly.
How do you feel about how Paul's doing here? It feels like we're actually ahead of time. So you've taken out your second generator already, and you have.
And it's only the 8th turn, or it's only 2 turns down. So
yeah, touch wood. You're doing all right. You've got plenty of turns left to seal the deal here.
yeah, looking pretty good, Paul.
Don't jinx it!
Paul, you're doing so well. I'm really pleased for you that nothing at all has gone wrong in this mission. It's just.
This is why
it's
we can't
all
have
lined
nice
up.
things, Bruce.
It's all lined up exactly as you would like it to. Not a single hiccup.
I forgot about that guy. Oops.
That's famous last words. I forgot about that guy.
I mean, that's usually how my sessions go. I get all overconfident. I totally forget there's someone there. Okay. If I go here, I can use the rend ability. to hit both
Do you
of
personally
them.
have a favourite assassin, Noah?
Yeah, well, just because it's so different and it's more of a, I mean, I'd argue it's more of a support class. The Qlexus is probably my favorite, but the Eversor is really fun. I mean, one thing we haven't touched on, and this is just a bit of the lore tied to the Eversor, is that if it is defeated, then he explodes, massive explosion, and deals damage to anything around it. So yeah, like each one is obviously its own thing, but I'd say Qlexus is my kind of like most sort of fun. It's sort of the most. It provides the most change to how I would normally play a mission.
Sure. No, that one feels particularly unique in the way it changes your approach to the game and how you're going to strategize. It really opens up lots of possibilities in terms of deciding what tactics you're going to use, giving you extra information that you wouldn't otherwise have. Seems fantastic. All right, we'll see how you do in this combat, Paul, and then we'll move along. But I'll give you the rest of this turn to see if you can take out some enemies.
I'm going to initiate his psychotic rage.
Nice. So that's going to really ramp up the kind of damage you can do.
Nice. Nicely eviscerated, Paul.
I'm already a very big fan of this unit.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's taken out all of its armor and then some.
see what I can do with him.
Just as a reminder then, Noah, so these units are available in every mission and in any combination of your squad with your Grey Knights. The only restriction being you can't have more than one of a given assassin unit.
That's right. Yeah. So you can configure your squad. I mean, provide that you collect all the assassins, you can configure your squad with 3 assassins and 1 knight, or 2 assassins and 1 knight. You just got to be very careful because the assassins are, they're not Astartes, right? They're not bioengineered super soldiers, so they aren't quite as durable, and you have to switch up your tactics as compared to how you would normally play a Chaos Gate mission.
Sure thing. All right. Well, I'm going to congratulate you there, Paul. I'm going to say that you are on the trajectory to succeed. So we'll give you the W for this one. Well done in this mission. If you want to get your hands on this yourselves at home, you can wishlist Execution Force already, and it's available for purchase tomorrow. Let's see if you can also continue Paul's legacy and succeed in the Death Guard boarding missions as well. We're going to take the last few moments of this stream to cover some other parts of the free update and the DLC that are coming out tomorrow. So, Noah, we talked already about the Tainted Suns, which is a new spawn group of enemies. Can you tell us a little bit about them that we haven't touched on yet? So, for example, you mentioned that they are the chosen ones of Mortarion. So how are they coming into play? Can you tell us a bit about the lore and the context behind them?
Yeah, so I mean, really, what they represent in the game is sort of a new type of spawn group, similar to how we introduced the Technophage Elite in the last DLC. So they're a themed spawn group. There's going to be a lot of units that you're already going to be familiar with, so a lot of the Death Guard units that you know and love. And they'll all have this unique advantage, which allows them to mutate much more aggressively over the course of the game. But then we've also introduced a few new units that will form parts of these spawn groups, and some of them are, I think, a little classic favorites from the 40k pantheon, and then some are just pretty big heavies. I don't know. Should we go over each one?
Yeah, please. Let's go into the individual units and who they are.
Okay, so the first off is the Nurgling Swarm. We already had introduced Nurglings through a very specific boss battle in the original game. And this form of the Nurglings is as a large pack, kind of climbing on top of each other. And they have a particularly annoying ability, which is to buff all of the other active units in the game and increase their HP. So a big theme that you're going to see with the Tainted Suns, combined with the new Warp Surges and some of the other units, is that you're going to have to deal with some spawn groups that have a lot more hit points. Just purely, they're very much tankier, and the Nurgling Swarm really contributes to that. So a key thing is to try and take those guys out early, knock them out so that the rest of the units don't benefit from their HP boost.
Right. No, thank you for the additional context and how to deal with them as well. It does sound like they'll be a priority target, especially when there's a large group of enemies all receiving benefits from them. Who is the second unit that we're going to be seeing as of tomorrow?
So the second unit is also a part of the Death Guard cadre. It's the Plague Surgeon. So this is a single target support unit. And what it can do is both heal allies and buff them substantially, giving them a lot more benefits to their mutations. This is a very dangerous unit to have on the battlefield. If it happens to buff a unit that already has a bunch of mutations active, you can see the benefits of those mutations doubling. So it can make a single, larger unit way more powerful and also almost kind of mini boss like.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I can see the threat involved there. Adding to the theme of mutations that is throughout this whole DLC is going to be one of the core issues for players to have to find a way around and deal with. Then we've got the third unit, and this is the big one. So could you tell us about the Beast of Nurgle?
Yeah, the Beast of Nurgle is a fun unit. It really just wants to get in close and hug anything it finds to death. It has the ability to spit and immobilize your Grey Knights and other allied units. And if you're not able to kind of get that unit out of the way of the Beast of Nurgle's next turn, it will move in and just destroy it immediately. So you're going to have to find some way to either disrupt the Beast or pull your immobilized unit out of the way, or it's going to basically hop in and crush it.
Sure. No, I can see that being a major threat for players to have to deal with. Thank you for explaining the new enemies to us. Those are part of the free update in the release tomorrow, aren't they? So it's not just those who have access to the DLC that will be encountering these enemies. Is that correct?
That's right. Those are all sort of free new units that'll be part of the regular campaign, even for those who don't buy the DLC.
Sure thing. In terms of other free content that's coming tomorrow, we touched on very lightly that there'll be new equipment that players will have access to help them deal with the new enemies we just mentioned. That includes some new war gear. What can you tell us about those new pieces of equipment?
Yeah, so there's a couple of new servo skulls. One in particular is the Purgation Skull, which is going to give you the ability to just target and purge a specific unit. Of course, with more mutations and more kind of mutation modifiers in Execution Force, it's going to be really useful to have that ability to just target a very nasty, hyper-mutated unit and remove all the mutations, because that can be a real big problem. We have an additional skull, which is the autoloader skull, which basically does exactly what it seems. You can target your allies and reload their ranged weapons, so that can be pretty useful. We've also modified the Seeker skull, which traditionally I think had some challenges as far as having kind of an equivalent level of combat capabilities. So that's now a little bit stronger. And finally, the new grenade is the Rad Grenade. And this one will also tie into a lot of the unit bleed themes that we've been going over the past little while. So the Rad Grenade just afflicts higher levels of bleed on targets.
Fantastic. All right, so lots of good stuff there to help players out and be as efficient as possible in dealing with these new challenges that we've introduced. All right.
Totally.
That just about covers everything that we wanted to show and talk about in the free update and the DLC coming out tomorrow. If you missed the earlier part of the show and you're joining us around this time, we've been talking about Execution Force, the second major DLC for Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate Daemonhunters, as well as a free update and the content that both of those bring. We hope you've enjoyed the show. I'm going to say thank you and goodbye to Noah for coming on and giving us a lot of context for the release tomorrow. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to see you both.
Thanks again to Noah, our special guest from Complex Games, and thank you all for watching. Today we looked at everything that's coming in Execution Force, the second DLC for Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate Daemonhunters, as well as the free update and all of the content that includes. So we looked at the assassin units, all 4 of them. Paul, you got to use each of them in 2 different mission types, and you did very well. Congratulations. We also had the 2 missions that I just mentioned, so the Tentarus Hive and the Death Guard boarding. So that's the main content, and on top of that, there's some extras such as new war gear, warp surges, enemies, etc. So if you missed it, do watch things back. If you want to get your hands on all of this content, you can wishlist the DLC today on Steam and the Epic Games Store, or you can buy it when it releases tomorrow. And like I mentioned, that's alongside a free update, which is going to be available to all owners of the game. If you do get your hands on it, use the hashtag ExecutionForce to let us know how you get on and for a chance to be shared on our social channels. Right, that's all we've got time for, Paul. So thanks again for joining me, and thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Goodbye.